Hello, Abnormal Investigations. I've got another one for you, and I hope you all enjoy this one. It's another Dogman encounter, so there's going to be 2 Dogman encounter videos released today. Thank you for all the support for bringing Hunter home. He's going to be coming home soon. We have a big court date coming up soon. And if you would like to help support bringing Hunter home, of course, the links are in the description of this video. Also, the P.O. box that we have is in the description of this video. A lot of y'all have been asking because you're wanting to send Hunter stuff. So yes, the P.O. box is in the description of all of our videos. You can find it there. And thank you guys for all you're doing, and God bless. Let's get into this one. Hello, I am a 21-year-old woman who lives in a log cabin down a dead-end road in the middle of the countryside. I have lived here my entire life, so this life is what I know. I have about 3 neighbors. This is important because this will take place around my closest neighbor's property. I wanted to tell this story because this neighbor has passed. She was a Spitfire Italian woman who drank beer and ate raw garlic with every meal. She passed at the ripe old age of 98 and was the kindest and toughest soul you'd ever meet. For context, I live in southern Illinois, close to the border of Missouri and Kentucky, so you can gauge that landscape I am surrounded by. You probably guessed, but I am bordered in a large cornfield to my back and miles of woods spanning into the next town over. I've always enjoyed the scenery around me. It feels tranquil most of the time. However, this is the countryside. There is bound to be weird occurrences every now and then. One thing I can say confidently is that I have absolutely no explanation for what happened to me when I was around 18. I'll preface by saying that I have faced many large animals. I was within 10 feet of a black bear in Tennessee. There was even one to have broken a tree from traveling train circus that ran through my area. The old train tracks and the shack were still in the woods just a mile from my house. The bobcats I chased out of my driveway are no threat, same with the coyotes that yelp outside my window most nights. Even the cougar that my dad had to shoot to get it off our property when I was younger wasn't nearly as scary as this thing that I so clearly encountered. To paint you a picture leading up to this date, I'll start with what I heard a few days prior. It was the weekend. I remember this became usually my dad would not ask me to drive after dark. My dad would ask me not to drive after dark. Most of us don't hear due to the volume of deer and the lack of street lamps, so it's dangerous to drive at night. And especially if I had school the next day. I had to drive him to the store and still have to because he has a condition where he cannot drive himself. I had begged him to make his famous chili, and he agreed to make it later in the week if he had the supplies. When we arrived home, the sun had just set, and I was grabbing the last few bags out of the trunk. That's when I heard it. This wasn't a coyote. I've heard every sound they make, yelping, crying, howling, fighting, whatever it may be. I can tell. This howl I heard, it was a singular howl, and it was deep. But worst of all, it was close. It came from the cornfield behind my house, which starts at around 30 feet from where I was standing. I shot my head up and I looked at my dad. He was wide-eyed also. A man who I know not to be afraid of a damn near anything. He showed a look of pure terror on his face. He turned to me and almost ripped the door off its hinges, whispered in a yelling whisper at me to run inside. That night we both sat in the living room in silence. He even changed the TV off from his normal cryptid-centered shows to Pawn Stars. We tried to think if there could somehow be wolves in the area passing through, but came up with nothing. We decided to call it a coy wolf, a coyote, and a wolf hybrid, and forget about it. We both knew there was no chance it was this far south without being spotted somewhere, either by hunters, farmers, or the towns, but, fear plays in the minds of all of our heads. I will say I forgot about this for a few days and was focused on my exams coming up in school. I remember because I had to wake up early to go to the prepare for the testing, which is exactly what happened on my last testing today before the winter break. It was foggy this morning and I was thinking of going out and feeding the chickens, so I pulled my blinds to look out to their coop and to see if their solar door had come up yet. Mind you, the sunrise barely touched the tree stumps, and the fog made it even darker outside. I went to put on my coat and was going to see if the elderly neighbor I mentioned had fed hers. She also had a very old dog, and I would feed it. I figured my barn cats also needed breakfast, so I headed outside before leaving for school. After feeding and loving on my cats, I headed for the chicken coop, and as I walked around my dad's pole barn, I saw it by my neighbor's pond. I thought it was her, or maybe her fishing gear, or her lawnmower. Every possible option ran through my mind at that point. That was until it started moving. A stray dog would be most plausible, but of this size, it would have to have been 2 beefy Irish wolfhounds in a black fur suit. I stopped dead in my tracks and hid behind a stack of wooden pallets behind the pole barn. I've never been struck with this amount of fear. I had no weapon nearby either. I felt myself black out for a second before gaining the courage to look again, hoping it hadn't made its way to me, and this time I peeked at it again and was very sure of what I was seeing. An extremely large wolf. I've grown up hearing locals talk about large black dogs sighted in the backyards and appearing on trail cams, but never did I think I would see it myself. This thing was massive compared to her brick sign and with the pond name. Being 5'4", my chin sat atop of the sign, and the creature was easily almost at the height by the shoulders alone. The first part of it I could make out was the higher hind legs. Its back came sloping down to a slightly shorter front legs, but bulky shoulders. Its muscles were obviously through its fur. This is still the visual ingrained into my memory, even to this day. I waited for it to turn towards me. The curiosity along with the fear to identify the creature was growing at me. I was pumped with adrenaline. I wanted to run, but I wanted to know for sure it was truly there, and not my mind playing tricks because of how early it was. I started gaining my sense of reality back and realized my neighbor's dog had been barking the whole time. This is a blind and a deaf dog, so he knew something was there by pure instinct. I guess this is what bothers me the most, the creature. So it started to turn back towards the deepest part of the woods. It lifted its head, and I saw it. I saw the light bounce off its eyes and the wet nose, and it watched it lick its chops. The fangs on the wolf made my heart drop. It could easily charge me, and if it had done it, it could do it in seconds. Fight or flight kicked in at this point, and I hightailed it back to my room. I sat on my floor and stared at the window, watching it to become consumed by the trees. I must have sat there waiting for almost an hour, because my mom came to see if I was up for school. I didn't tell her what I saw, just to check on my neighbor with my dad later that day. Of course, she was confused, but sent me off to school with a promise to do so. I came home early that day and ran into my house as fast as I could to be sure everyone was still there. I remember my dad had a strange look and smiled at me after saying my neighbor was fine. He got the strange look back again after my mom left the room and told me that there was a coyote carcass by the pond. I told him to point out my window to where it was. He pointed exactly where I saw the wolf. I told him everything out of fear, but he looked at me as if he had already knew. I became paranoid about leaving the doors or windows unlocked, checking the property at night when everyone was asleep. It has even caused me PTSD to where I check the doors and windows over and over and over, even though I know that I just checked them. And I've even researched late into the night about what else this could possibly have been, but nothing added up. Eventually, as time passed, I forgot about it for the most part and would only remember Dad's show mentioning wolf-like creatures. I heard some variation of the howl a couple of times after that in the passing months, but it was just glad it sounded further away until it finally stopped. I'm still fearful to go outside at night, and I have been having recurring nightmares of this creature that I've dreamed could be a werewolf. Some might say I can't be because it didn't stand up, but I believe if it did feel eyes on it, I most definitely would have. This thing, I believe, was very capable of standing up. I had pushed this back to the back of my mind for a long time and always wanted to share my experience, but fear of being deemed a liar when I so clearly saw this halted me. I've recently been having nightmares of werewolves nearly every night, and I felt like it was time to share it, and I wanted to share it with you, Mike. I've noticed a lot of people have shared their stories with you for the first time because you're a genuine person, and I think that you're a great person to tell my story. Thank you, Mike, for sharing my story, and any thoughts you have on it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for choosing me to share your story. I would say that what you saw wasn't a regular wolf. Whatever this was probably killed that coyote and was eating it, or it would killed it over, could be a, territorial thing. But if it has moved on and it's not bothering you now, and you say it's further away, you haven't shot it, you haven't heard it, I would put up lights outside, make a barrier of lights, and just picture the lights as a fence roll to keep something out, and use those to keep it away from your house, and maybe put up some trail cams. They don't like those, and hopefully that will keep it out of your yard. But that's what I would start with. I really enjoyed this story. It was a really interesting story, and I want to thank you very much for sharing it. And until next time, guys, keep your head on a swivel. Don't be something's dinner. And remember, if it looks like a werewolf and walks like a werewolf, it may be a dogman. Thanks for listening, guys.